Try to relax, forego the stress. Something ain't popping and you look a mess. Here's a suggestion, I hope it works for you. You better chill. Good evening, and welcome to this episode of Women in Jazz Philadelphia with yours truly, your hostess, Khadija Renee, local jazz diva. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this expose on the role that women played in the development and the furthering of the great American classical music that we call jazz. This evening, we're going to be featuring the great Mary Lou Williams. Yes, well, for those of you who don't know anything about the Mary Lou Williams, you're going to learn a lot about her this evening. She was a phenomenal arranger, composer, pianist, and leader amongst the jazz musicians of 6 decades, really. I think she started probably in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Here with us this evening to teach us more about the great Mary Lou Williams is Professor Tammy Cornudo. She's a professor of musicology at the Miami University. No, not in Florida, but in Ohio. Yes, there's a Miami University in Florida, and Professor Tammy Cornudo is an affiliate faculty of American Studies, Black World Studies, Women and Gender and Sexuality Studies. Dr. Cornudo is the president of the Society of American Music. And in 2014, she won the Miami University Alumni Association Effective Educator Award. So she has a book out, and it talks very much about our premier artist that we're featuring this evening, the great, late Mary Lou Williams. So why don't we bring on Professor Cornudo. Join me in welcoming Professor Mary Lou Williams. I'm sorry, Professor Tammy Cornudo. But you know what? I think that Mary Lou Williams should have been called a professor posthumously because she did influence some of the great artists that we know of, like Theolonius Monk, Dizzy Gillespie, etc. So without further ado, please welcome Professor Tammy Cornudo. Hi, Professor.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
The pleasure's all ours, I assure you of that. And I know you are in the full swing of the fall semester at Miami University, and it's very kind of you to take time out and tell us more about your book, Soul on Soul, The Life and Music of Mary Lou Williams, and the documentary, Mary Lou Williams, the lady who swings the band. You also had some contributing roles in that as well. So, Professor, why do you think it's important for the world to know about the history and impact of women in jazz and the genre of jazz, as well as other genres?
I think, too often our historical perspective is focused just solely on a few master musicians who we have deemed as the leaders or innovators of particular sounds. And that has only given us a small glimpse of what is a rich musical history. And so, oftentimes the women who were part of those scenes and just as innovative in what they were doing musically are left out. And I think it's time that we began to expand our historical gaze and really consider not just, who are these names that get promoted over and over again, but ask the questions, who do we not know? Who is also playing? Who have we not heard from during these particular time periods and in relation to these different subgenres of popular music?
Exactly. And for those of you in the audience who are not familiar with the late, great Mary Lou Williams, how would you encapsulate her for those who are novice to her?
Well, I think it's not an overstatement to say that she is the history of jazz, that she embodies the history of jazz. She had a 6-decade career that began in the 1920s when she was just a young woman, and that career stretched into her death in 1981. And unlike many jazz musicians that we talk about that are kind of locked in time with a particular style, genre, or or performance aesthetic, Mary Lou Williams moved fluidly through all the eras of jazz, and really was provides us a holistic view of jazz history. You know, she was a composer, an instrumentalist, she was an arranger, she was an activist, but, she was also an educator. So your point at the very beginning of saying that she should have been called a professor, in her last year, she was called a professor, because she spent the last 12 years of her life teaching jazz, appreciation and also leading, the jazz, band at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina.
Wow.
So rich history, rich history.
Very rich history. At a time when the music was dominated by men, and the women were not allowed to really emerge as leaders, composers, arrangers. Instead, they were highlighted and casted as female singers out in front of the band singing, being alluring and pretty and sensual. But the fact of the matter is, the truth of the matter is, many, 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 many women of all races and colors were creating music just as powerful and meaningful and popular as the men.
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
yes, indeed. And that's the purpose of our series, Women in Jazz, to kind of let the elephants in the room come out and play. Um, as a matter of fact, speaking of playing, why don't we expose our listening audience to one of the songs that the fabulous Mary Lou Williams recorded, a popular tune from a Broadway play, It Ain't Necessarily So.
Mm.
Let's listen to her version, her taste, her twist on that great song. And we'll be right back. So, Professor Cornudo, would you elaborate and define what you meant when in your book when you alluded to the 1960s being the painful era for American music?
Yeah. Well, in particular, in relation to Mary Lou Williams, it was a painful period because in the mid 1950s, while in Europe, kind of her disillusionment with the music business, but also the exploitation that she experienced as a Black woman, as a female artist, kind of collided. And she had what we would equate nowadays with an emotional breakdown. It's not clear how profound or if, that breakdown was, but it did cause her in 1954 to walk away from a lucrative gig in a Paris nightclub and to disappear for a period of 3 years. In that 3 years, she said that she would never play again. But also in that period of time, she um, she converted to Catholicism and began to devote herself to the rehabilitation of musicians. And I think that's the kind of pain, her own personal pain became the impetus for trying to heal the pain of others, right? And also, that pain coincides with what is the advancement of civil rights in America, but the violent backlash that we start to see happening against activists who are engaged in social change. And so those things had a profound impact on Mary Lou Williams, so trying to overcome her own personal marginalization and her own emotional struggles while still trying to advance a type of camaraderie and fraternity with other jazz musicians and seeing the pain of those jazz musicians and how addiction oftentimes would ruin their lives. And so um, it's an interesting period for her because that work off leads to her entering another phase of performance and composing because she begins to write Catholic hymns as well as jazz masses. And so, spirituality becomes her solution to the social crisis of the day.
But away from the piano, Mary Lou Williams was a woman in a man's world, a Black person in a white only society. She was a very ambitious artist and she dared to be different and struggled against the imperatives of being a star. Would you agree with that?
Yes, ma'am. Definitely. And also dealt with the colorism that was present in America's popular culture at that period of time. Being a beautiful dark-skinned woman, it was hard for agents to find a way in which to market her in the same way that they marketed like a fair-skinned Hazel Scott, who was just as talented. But her beauty led her to Hollywood, where Mary Lou Williams was never kind of courted in that same way.
I see. I can imagine what the struggle must have been for her to just be recognized for who and what she was. And I'm sure she wasn't the only artist, a female of African American genre that went through that same type of struggle. I wanted to just take a moment and share with our audience another composition by the late, great Mary Lou Williams. Earlier, we heard her version of a Broadway tune, but I'd like to show people something about her range. And so I wanted to play a song called Mary Lou Williams Solo Blues Piano. Take a listen, everyone, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back, everybody. Seems like you got another taste of what the phenomenal range of talent Mary Lou Williams possessed. Dr. Canuto, you mentioned something about her also being an activist.
Very much so. So her activism not only involved, the traditional lines of kind of communal and social change that we saw or we reflect on or divine in the 60s struggle. But also, she was very much an activist in terms of altering the relationship between Black Catholics and the Catholic Church. So her music was at a crucial time in which the Catholic Church began to investigate its history of civil rights and its lack of acknowledgement of Black Catholics, not only in the United States, but globally. So her music really represented how there was real conversation during this period about how to marry African culture, African identity in all its derivative forms within the liturgy and the practices of the Catholic Church. But on the other side, she was also working within her Harlem community to mentor young people about not only their musical history, but also their history as Black people. And so while she was not a huge proponent of the civil rights movement in the way that Max Roach or a Abby Lincoln or Charles Mingus was. She chose to embed herself into, the kind of work with young people that we would equate with the type of, activism.
Excellent. I was wondering, what actually inspired you to conduct this undertaking, the writing of this book, Soul on Soul, The Life and Music of Mary Lou Williams? Why did you choose that topic?
Well, you know what? It's been really a major part of my life, Khadijah. I started working on her when I was a graduate student at The Ohio State University. So in the early 90s, I kind of discovered Mary Lou on my own journey as a pianist and a musician. And her music really spoke to me. Her story really spoke to me because I'm going to be honest with you. I did not know that many Black women instrumentalists in jazz. I knew a lot of singers, but I didn't know instrumentalists. And so she was kind of my entry point into that world as a pianist because I was experimenting with jazz. But also she was instrumental in helping me think about my own self as a Black woman who was entering spaces that were largely white and largely male-centered. So, I started really researching her in 1995. I went to the Institute of Jazz Studies at Rutgers University at a time when her materials were just being donated to the institute. And so I was amongst some of the first scholars to really look at the uncatalogued works. And it was there that I discovered these religious pieces. So those religious pieces really spoke to me as someone who had spent a great deal of her life being a church musician and grew up in the church. And so it was a different side of faith. And it really provided me a lot of insight to how she was trying to enact social change in a very different way than, some of her peers in terms of the civil rights movement. So my book, Soul on Soul, was actually first written in 2004. And it was a dialogue. It was a dialogue to the first book written about her, that I felt really only touched on part of the musical legacy of Mary Lou Williams. That book really laid more of its weight toward the personal aspects of her life. And I'm sure that oftentimes as women, our personal lives can eclipse what contributions we make in an intellectual or creative way. And I just didn't want this Black woman's story to be left up to who she was married to and who she potentially dated or slept with, and the book doesn't completely, I don't no way want to disparage this other author's work, but I felt like there needed to be more contextualization of Mary Lou within our history and within the Black history in America. And I also wanted to put her music at the forefront so that we never had to engage with her in the kind of reclamation culture that we've had to do with Billie Holiday, and all of these other women who the pathologies of their life, which has been created by the racism of this world and the sexism of this world, gets exploited, right? And in many ways eclipse what their contribution is. So the book now has been released with a new preface. So this is She's beautiful, and it's in paperback and it's an ebook. But it really updates the story from where I left off in 2004, which was at her death in 1981.
Well, her personal life was quite interesting as
Oh,
well. I
yeah,
see
it
that she
was.
11 children, and she played piano from the age of 3 and
Yeah.
4. Bricks in her window to stop her from playing the piano all the time. And I imagine because she came up down south,
She was
right? Born and
raised in
raised down
Atlanta,
south.
Georgia. Her family migrated to Pittsburgh around 1915, and dealing with even the racism that was present in the North in some of these ethnic communities, So it's a very rich story.
Yes. And I wonder if they're planning to make a movie about her, because she certainly is movie worthy.
Mhm.
To be doing stories about other great African American females, and I think she's deserving of one too. I hope someone will produce. But it was interesting that you mentioned that she found. I wonder how she found jazz. I wonder how she started playing jazz. Do you know that part of her story?
Well, it had to do with the rich environment of Pittsburgh.
Ah,
When at the time when she moved to Pittsburgh, a lot of the music culture was not just happening in theaters, but a lot of that culture was happening within neighborhood homes. So it was nothing to hear people playing piano within their homes, and it was nothing for people to have, Black people to have player pianos as well. But a major part of her indoctrination of jazz had to do with her stepfather, Fletcher Burley, taking her to the TOBA theater in Pittsburgh. And that's where she first heard Lovey Austin, the great band leader, arranger, and pianist, and said, that's something I want to do. So, it really speaks to a part of jazz history that I think we touch upon sometimes, but we don't really fully look at. And that is how this music was accessible in our communities in ways that went beyond nightclubs. And even extended beyond records, right? And so her being able to go to a theater with her stepfather, and her being able to hear this music within her neighborhood and becoming part of that regional scene was very much important in terms of her development.
I see. Well, one of the reasons why I'm very grateful that the Mary Lou Williams Foundation allowed me to do this episode was because I wanted to make sure that people understood the impact she had on the genre of music. She wrote hundreds of compositions and arrangements and recorded more than 100 records. And she wrote and arranged for some of the most well-known male jazz icons that we can think of, like Duke Ellington and Benny Goodman. And she was friends and mentor and teacher to the great Theolonius Monk. But what I didn't know is that, he actually borrowed one of her riffs and created a hit from it.
Yes, he did. He took the first couple of bars from a song called Walking and Swinging, which was one of Andy Kirk's big hits back in 1936, and it became the basis of his song Rhythming. So that groove you hear at the very beginning of his song was based on her. I think it was an homage to her in many ways.
All right. Well, just to get the audience a little bit more taste of the greatness of Mary Lou's musical capabilities, let's play one more song called Miss Dee Dee, which has a little bit more of the bebop flair. Check that out. everybody, and we'll be right back. And when we do come back, we're going to bring in Philadelphia's own finest female pianist, arranger, composer, teacher, educator, who reminds all of us here in the Philadelphia region of the essence of the great Mary Lou Williams. As a matter of fact, Mary Lou Williams is one of her mentors, and she's one of our star-studded recipients of many awards and many accolades here in the city. Mrs. Kendra Butler Waters will be joining us shortly, so stand by. All right, so now everybody, you got a chance to hear and get the feeling of the soul and the greatness of a female leader, a woman in jazz, here on Women in Jazz Philadelphia. All right, so Dr. Knuddle, tell me how your book was received.
Well, in 2004, when it first came out, it was very well received, and it's had a great history as a book. It is released now under a different publisher because 2 years ago, my original publisher uh, went out of business, and so I'm glad to see Mary Lou have new life and this book to live again. And so I really feel like it's a blessing to be able to have this book out there and to continue to tell her story, but hopefully inspire other people to look and listen for other women musicians that are around them, that are out there.
All right, I quite agree. So, Professor, I wanted to have the pleasure to bring on our own Mary Lou Williams inspired artist from the Philadelphia region, the fabulous Mrs. Kendra Butler Waters, to tell us a little bit more about what inspires her in her music and the influence that she feels as though Mary Lou Williams has had on her life. But first, I forgot to tell my audience a little bit about her. Not only is she a pianist and composer and vocalist, she studied both classical and jazz piano with the world-renowned Charles Pettaway for 11 years. She studied jazz piano with some of Philadelphia's well-known pianists like Don Wilson, Kenny Gates, Eddie Green. Kendra has directed several performances with the Philadelphia Jazz Project, and she also was the jazz resident at the Philadelphia Kimmel Center of Performing Arts here in Philadelphia, downtown, in the year 2015, 2016. So without further ado, who also has a CD coming out, let's bring on our own original composer and band leader, Miss Kendra Butler Waters.
Hello, how are you, Khadija? Thank you for having me.
Namaste, Queen. It's always a pleasure to see you and an honor to have you aboard with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Please tell the world, what are you doing lately with your music?
Well, I'm thankful to have a new album that is coming out titled Faith Walk. And that actually the date got pushed back because of COVID. It was supposed to be released just this past week, but it looks like it's being pushed back to December in terms of distribution stuff with disc makers, but it is coming out. And you can also always, visit my website for more information with regards to that. And really, honestly, I've just been, plugging the album. I just released a single from the album called "The Negro Spirituals." It's a medley of three Negro spirituals, and my husband and I work collaboratively in terms of releasing a video that came out earlier this month. In addition to a few other composing projects, I just finished composing music along with a few other women for a piece called Etat Donné, which is by a French artist. And his work is installed at the Philadelphia Art Museum, and we were commissioned to compose music for that. Along with a few other awesome projects that are kind of in the works, and moving forward. But the main piece is the Faith Walk album, if you will.
Well, congratulations on your most recent CD project, and I'm excited about the release, and I can't wait to get my copy.
Thank you.
I hope.
Of course.
Well, listen, you mentioned spirituals, uh, sacred music. What are the influences in your life that causes you to integrate your love of spiritual and religious uh, connotations into your music? What are your influences?
Sure. I mean, I'm a woman of faith. I often say that, God is a large part of my identity and my faith in him. And, I really truly do feel commissioned that is a part of the message with my music. Um, with jazz, with all of performances and music that I release, I try to make the central piece of my music something that encourages people, something that inspires them, something that pulls them in and makes them think. That by the end of that concert, or by the end of that show, or by the end of that presentation, that they walk away feeling encouraged to face what we have to face on a regular daily basis. And so, that is a large part of my musical presentation. That's a large part of the music that I obviously release and the concerts. And even just me as a person, I try to make it a point that any person that I encounter, friend, foe, stranger, that they understand that, there's hope. And in the music that we deliver, there has to be hope attached to it, which is why and I'm sure you're going to ask this later, but why I feel such a personal connection to Mary Lou Williams as, an African American woman who, really came into her own. And that I call it the second chapter of her life, where, a lot of the fame and the her where she catapulted in music was at that period when she, intertwined faith into her music.
I understand that. As a matter of fact, I remember a couple of years back in West Philadelphia, I came out to hear you perform in concert, and you did a tribute to Mary Lou Williams.
I did. When Carol Bash premiered her documentary film about Mary Lou Williams here in Philadelphia, it was at the International House. And Homer Jackson, director of the Philadelphia Jazz Project, he called me. I think it was even like a week before the performance. He was like, "Hey, can you put something together? We have a baby grand piano. We'd like to come for you to come and do a tribute to Mary Lou Williams. Um, you know, find out as much as you can about her. I'm gonna send you some stuff too." And when he told me that, I went to work and I started studying her works. studying her music. I went to the library. You know, I'm I say a learned person, but I love to read. If someone gives me a task, I try to, you know, fully immerse myself into their life. So after doing that, I kind of understood as much as I could in terms of, you know, the holistic approach of who she was, and developed, came up with a medley of tunes that I had done of hers. I think at that time I did syllogism. I had done like a traditional hymn that had more of like a stride, left-handed movement, as well as what's the other piece that I did? There was one more piece that I did. I think it was a boogie woogie blues, and it was all medley together. And the solo piano presentation was right before Carol Bash's premiere of the film, and it really kind of brought everything together, especially to have an African American woman, you know, playing prior to the premiere of the film here in our city that we love.
Wow. Much for sharing that. And the common thread that you have with the great Mary Lou Williams is that you both are members of the Catholic faith. That's interesting, I find.
Well, I mean, I'm Protestant, so I mean, we both love Jesus. At the core of it, we both love Jesus. But I think that's our commonality in terms of that, you know, that God is the center of, you know, the music that we've produced. The beauty of her life, if you really look, you know, from the research that I've done, the beauty of her life is that when she came back, when a friend introduced to her, you know, asked her to come to a service, and she felt her life was changed when she got saved and all of that, that she just literally catapulted into the stratosphere. I mean, you're talking about someone who originally, when we look at the how she kind of got started and how she went from Toba, I know that Dr. Knodel had mentioned how, you know, she started in Toba, which was basically like the Chitlin circuit, and how she went through all of that time, and she struggled, and then eventually making it as a arranger into Andy Kirk's band, and doing arrangements and compositions for Duke Ellington, and not necessarily getting her credit or her pay or her recognition. And then the struggle that she had with that, and the competing with Hazel Scott. And I mean, it goes on and on. And later in life, when she came to faith, that's when, I mean, she became the music director for that huge Catholic church in New York, and how she catapulted, I mean, with teaching opportunities and Sesame Street and this place and that place, that, you know, she credits her faith as being a central piece to her success. And it's not necessarily worldly success where maybe she thought that she had to have a lot of money, but her purpose was fulfilled thereafter. And it's a whole different mindset and a whole different approach to music when you feel that there's purpose behind it. So,
Yes. She was a representative of purpose in terms of the role of women in jazz. Dr. Canuto, could you comment on how she did impact and pave the way for many women in the genre of jazz?
Well, I think it falls in line with much of what Kendra has outlined. You know, as an arranger, you know, she was one of the key women who helped create this sound that we equate with both swing or big band jazz or even jump blues, which later, you know, becomes the basis of R&B after World War II. You know, she's also you know, composing in the bebop idiom. But most of all, one of the things I think doesn't get talked about is the fact that, you know, she alongside with Ellington really bridge a musical and ideological gap between jazz musicians or jazz music and the American concert hall. And I'm not talking about we just have jazz concerts at Carnegie Hall. I'm talking about them concertizing and presenting these large scale works that really show the influence that classical music had on jazz musicians, really showed that jazz musicians were not thinking just about the conventional ideas of a big band arrangement or as a big band, but visualizing the big band as an orchestra. And she even took it further than Ellington, who used his orchestra as kind of his medium. But in 1945, 46, her Zodiac Suite is performed by chamber orchestras, the New York Philharmonic Chamber Orchestra. She has a concert at Town Hall. This is groundbreaking, right? Because this is setting up then, what is this post-war sound in the American Concert Hall that is not only purveyed by musicians like the Modern Jazz Quartet, but also we hear that in Black female composers like Margaret Bonds, like Undine Smith Moore, Dorothy Rudmore, these Black women who are operating in classical music, who are influenced by these jazz rhythms and jazz harmonies. So, I think what she really did was stretch and always challenge people in terms of what they sonically thought jazz was. And she also challenged how they believed jazz could operate in different spaces. And I think, you see that legacy in Melba Liston. You can hear it in Toshiko Akiyoshi, who takes the big band orchestra and really makes it into this modern vehicle. So it's far reaching, I hear echoes of Mary Lou in so many places. And I think she really provided a strong model for women instrumentalists and also for women as arrangers and educators and activists, to understand their purpose, their place, and that they could carve out their space, not wait for someone to give them permission, but to carve out their own specific space.
Excellent. I agree. And Kendra, speaking of carving out a space, you as a woman, a female band leader, arranger, and composer, what kind of challenges have you faced in the music genre here in the Philadelphia region yourself? Can you share experience with us?
Sure. I mean, I say that my experience is with musicians, and I have to be quite honest, with musicians, male musicians that I've worked with, most male musicians have always treated me with the utmost respect. I think, once some male musicians know that you can play and they know that you know how to handle your business, that it sets you apart. And from that, there's a respect that's there. And, I mean, but I will say that I have been in instances where if I'm the band leader and I'm commanding a group, and I had a particular incident for this larger scale concert. This was a couple years ago, and the engineer who was engineering my show at this particular large venue didn't want to listen to what I was asking. I mean, completely disrespected me. I had to have one of my male musicians confront him and say, "Hey, she's the band leader. You need to ask her these questions." And it wasn't until after the first set, after we finished the first set, that he came to me and said something like, "Oh, well, can we kiss and make up?" And I looked at him and I said, "Would you say this to a man who was leading this band? Can we kiss and make up?" And, those types of interesting, not just slick comments, but just the disregard in terms of respect, or just at the basic core of it, humanity. Forget the fact that I'm a woman. In the basic core of humanity, just respect someone who's handling, the concert, who obviously is the band leader and is the best person to speak to, with regards to questions that you have about how instruments should be mic'd, or the levels of the tunes, or how I want the piano to be mic'd or positioned, with regard to all the other instruments. I feel like I've dealt more with some of the back end stuff than with the musicians themselves. And I only say that because Philly is a tough city. If you know how to play, people will give you your respect. If you know how to command your band, people will give you your respect. If so and so says, "Oh yeah, I can vouch for Kendra," I know, people will give you your proper respect because they know the hard work that you've put forth, and all of that. But like I said, it's been more in terms of the background stuff that I've dealt with. And I've heard that from other female musicians,
Mm,
that it's a lot of the back end stuff that
mhm.
many of us, have dealt with.
I see. I appreciate you sharing that experience with us. And I'm hoping that programs like this will continue to educate the community at large about the power of the divine feminine energy and that we as women, we are leaders and we've always been there and we always continue to be there. Um, Kendra, we're going to segue into a song that you recently composed. Can you tell us a little bit about us before we play it?
Sure. I believe that you're referencing the first movement of my Elizabethan suite. So I composed a four-part suite. And it's called the Elizabethan Suite. The first movement is the recording that you are getting ready to play, called Sweet Baby Cakes. And the entire suite is an ode to my grandmother. She passed away when I was 3. And each movement kind of chronicles a major period of my growing into womanhood. So I figured that would be very appropriate for this evening's wonderful program. Since we're focusing on the power of the woman.
That's right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, take a listen at Sweet Baby Cakes. Original composition by our own Kendra Butler Waters, and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Kendra Butler Waters, a jazz pianist from Elkins Park, just outside of Philadelphia. For today, I will be playing the Elizabethan Suite, an original piece of mine, as part of a larger body of work. I'll be playing just the first movement, which is called Sweet Baby Cakes. It is an ode to my grandmother who passed away many years ago. I hope you enjoy. We have waited for your life
right. That was an original composition by our own Kendra Butler Waters, composer, arranger, and band leader, following in the footsteps of many great females who led the way for other females like our own Kendra. So thank you for sharing that. And we'll hear one more song by you. That's the second part of the suite we're going to be hearing later.
Actually, it was one of Mary Lou Williams' original tunes called
Ah,
Philadelphia.
all right. So we're going to hear our very own tribute to the great late Mary Lou Williams, who was featured in a documentary that I want to make sure that my audience knows is in existence. It's called Mary Lou Williams, the lady who swings the band, and our own Professor Tammy Canoodle from Miami University in Ohio made some very important contributions to that creation. Could you elaborate on that for us, Doctor?
Yes. First of all, I just think it's a beautiful film, and it's so wonderful to see Carol's vision for telling Mary Lou's story come to life in that way. You know, it really tries to encapsulate the full breadth of Mary Lou's life and her career, and I think it features much insight, and so. You know, it was an interesting experience. It was one of the first movie projects that I worked with. And, you know, it was a 10-year process with Carol. So I met her earlier in the process of making that film. And just to see the end product and the beauty of it, it was definitely worth seeing. It's worth owning as well. I think it provides such a rich tapestry that I think you could teach a whole history of jazz class by just looking at different aspects of that movie and taking Mary Lou's history in that, because she intersects with so many people in so many eras.
Right. I quite agree. I guess it's available. You can just go to any purchase medium and order it and have it delivered to your house. So check it out. Mary Lou Williams, the woman, the lady who swung the band. Kendra, did you happen to see that documentary?
Many times. I mean, the first time that I saw it was when I performed prior to the premiere in Philadelphia. I'm actually, you know, I keep in contact with Carol Bash, who is an amazing, you know, I mean, she has her own film company and she did an amazing job of putting this film together. And she also featured the late, great Jerry Allen, and Jerry has since passed. But thankfully, she was able to be a part of this amazing film. I actually used the film when I taught at Penn. I did a 2-day teaching series about, well, I said a 2-class session about women in jazz, and I showed this film. I had the university purchase the film just to be able to share with the students who, you know, were blown away by, you know, Mary Lou Williams' life and her legacy, and most students hadn't heard of her. You know, so it's an insanely important film. You can Google it, and you can see that it's readily available there. You know, you can check out Carol Bash, who has several other amazing, you know, contributions that focuses on the life of African Americans and Native Americans. I mean, she has a huge catalog of work, but it's a hugely impactful film.
Excellent. Well, as both a pianist and composer, she was a wellspring of daring creativity. She helped shape the 20th century sound of America. And most of all, she did not allow herself to be pushed back. And she kept saying, I can, when she was told you can't. So that attitude nearly cost her everything, but she still persevered. And as you said, she found her self, her meaning, her well-roundedness, her fortitude to push forward and do what she wanted to do and needed to do for the world through her spirituality. So spirituality, once again, arises its wonderful head and gives us strength, especially as African American women. We stand on our 2 feet in the ground of spirituality. It helps us to move forward. As a matter of fact, I don't think people really know that Professor Canoodle is a pianist and composer herself, and also is very deeply ingrained in her spiritual life. Is that true, Doctor?
Yes, I'm also an ordained minister,
Oh,
and so so I spent a great deal of my time on both sides of the pulpit as a musician, but also as a teacher, spoken word. So faith is very much a part of what I do and why I do. And I will tell you, her spiritual works were my first real undertaking of talking about Mary Lou Williams, because the substance of her faith resonated with me, because that has been the thing that I credit with everything that you read about me, every line that you read about in my biography. It's all been because of God, and it's all been because of faith and understanding who I was in him, or her, if you refer to the divine mother, because God is all. You know, that definition of who I am is rooted in that, in the knowledge that if the door is open, that you have the strength and the ability to walk through it if you have the faith, if you enact your faith.
I quite agree. I profess the faith of Islam, and my belief in a higher being has definitely helped me to find the courage to just live and breathe and create. That's what I'm all about, creating, because he is the master creator. He created us, so we are reflections of him. So therefore we can do as he does. And we all have the power to create. And so I've created this Women in Jazz series, Philadelphia, to make sure that the world understands and appreciates and hears that, like you said, God is all. He's definitely feminine. He's part of his nature is the divine feminine. So I honor him through my work to make sure that people understand how God is all encompassing and definitely affects the lives of women as well as men. As a matter of fact, we are in the age of the divine feminine, and we're coming back in to take over the world and bring peace to the world now. And that's right, I said that. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate you joining me to honor the late, great Mary Lou Williams. And each of you are making a wonderful contribution to music and to understanding the power of women. I appreciate everything that you do. And may you continue to be blessed.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being here with you two women. Thank you.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take this show out with the final composition offered to us by our fabulous Philadelphia recipient of the Kimmel Center's residency program. Ms. Kendra Butler Waters is going to play a Mary Lou Williams composition. And thank you very much for joining us in this episode. Stay tuned for our next episode. And thank you so much for joining us, and everybody be blessed. Namaste.
Life can be brutal and you might get pissed. Here's the solution: unclench your fist. You'll make it better if you can just be cool. You better chill, 'cause that's the deal. You better chill for real.
Lights, camera, action!